It's a little after 3 o'clock, and we'll call the meeting to order. I'd ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Commissioner Peoples.
Here.
Commissioner Blatt.
Here.
Commissioner Charnenko.
Here.
Commissioner Gillior.
Here.
Commissioner Holmes. Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Wynn.
Here.
Commissioner Yude. Commissioner Varnum. Mr. Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you. The first item is the approval of the minutes from the July 24th, 2019 meeting. I'd ask the commissioners if they have any corrections to the minutes. Hearing no corrections, is there a motion for approval?
Motion.
We have a motion from Gilroy,
Second.
a second from Charnico. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. We have no cases withdrawn, no continuance requests, nothing on the consent docket, so we will move on to cases for individual consideration. And I will be, okay. And we've just received James Varnum as well. On item 6A, I will be recusing, and the vice chair will handle this matter.
Item number 6A is case number UDC A 19-00010 on Northwest 6th Street. Is the applicant present? Thank you. Does somebody want to present this? Start it up.
Sure. Yes, Michael and Paula are both out today. This case was heard at last month's meeting. The motion was to approve. The vote was a tie. So the case was automatically continued to this meeting. The applicant has not changed anything about the nature of the request, which is to put synthetic turf in portions of the street right-of-way. So the applicant's drawings are the same. Staff did update our report to reflect some of, hold on, let me get this paperwork moving first. So staff did update the staff report to address some of the discussion that came up last time. One, we took a closer look back at what had been included in the original certificate of approval on the original project. The plans did not say if the area was turf or grass, although there was a section detail that noted grass. The rendering showed green turf. You can't tell if that was intended to be natural or synthetic. We also looked more closely at what the landscaping regulations said, and we looked more at what trees and plants for Oklahoma City and what putting down roots guidelines said, because all of those are still applicable to this project. All of these guidelines suggest that turf grass is natural. The putting down roots also doesn't specifically address synthetic turf, but it does contain a lot of guidelines about selecting disease-resistant, drought-tolerant plants, anything that reduces maintenance and mowing and pesticides. I also had a discussion with code enforcement because a lot of questions from last time had to do with, well, what happens if it starts fraying at the seams? What happens if it becomes discolored and gets weeds? The only aspect of lawn care that code enforcement looks at is the height of the plant material, the height of the grass, or the height of the weeds in the front lawn. And that's regulated by state statute. The city doesn't have guidelines on top of that. Code enforcement also told me that the property maintenance code doesn't cover lawns, that property maintenance code is specific to structures. So what the lawn is what the lawn is, as long as it's under 12 inches in height. Staff left our recommendation to deny. I feel there's enough that all of the regulations and guidelines, to me, assume a natural surface. That does not mean, to me, that the commission couldn't find that an artificial surface is appropriate in any given location. So, also by email, earlier this week or last week, we distributed a document we got from the applicant that showed some other examples throughout the city that had artificial turf, and we made comments on top of that because we wanted to understand where these were and how they were applicable. Most of the examples, it's this document here. It was emailed to you, and I think David just distributed copies. Most of these applications are on private property, specifically in the backyard. Then this week, the applicant submitted some additional photos of installations, one at Leadership Square and one on a front lawn on 8th Street. And those were just now distributed to you in some images that the applicant just handed out. So with that, I'll let the applicant talk.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. As staff said, this was a hearing that lasted, I think, quite a while last time. It was a 3-3 vote. Two of the people that voted for it are here. The third one that voted for it wasn't here, and we have a member here that is here today that wasn't here last time. One of the things that this hearing should allow is Mr. Brendan Parker, who owns Always Greener, who actually installed this. The sense that I got, perhaps incorrectly, but the sense that I got from this side of the horseshoe was that some of the folks that voted against it, in theory, don't have big problems with this application, but the question is, how do we ensure that it is a product that is at a certain level so that these problems that we're concerned about don't occur? I think Mr. Parker is going to be in a position to answer those questions. What I suggested last time is if there were a motion to approve, perhaps you could, in the motion, make the motion require a certain level of benchmarks. Some of the documents you got handed out deal with lead-free, zinc-free. It's this idea that the old way of doing these isn't the way that it's done anymore. In the staff report, and I think it's still in this time, it goes through this South Ogden study, and as I pointed out last time, the city of South Ogden actually went ahead and approved an ordinance that allows for turf, but it was reviewing a study of an older material. We think about the older material where you might still see on football fields where when an athlete is running, little shreds of tire or rubber are coming up. That is not what we have here. There is no toxicity at issue with this product. And so there's a host of reasons why it's beneficial. I don't want to go through all of the reasons because we kind of debated that ad nauseum unless Commissioner Varnum would like to hear those. But I do want Brendan to get up here and speak here in a moment. But I do want to point you back to the guidelines, and at page 4 of your staff report under the consideration paragraph, and it says in the second paragraph under 3, the downtown guidelines do not specify what types of material can or should be used in tree wells or parkway areas in the street right-of-way, other than to say that tree wells should be covered with a grate, brick, or stone, or landscape treatments. The thing that I continue to struggle with this product is if you think about the way that it's installed, the sub-base is a gravel. It doesn't have to be an attractive gravel. But the gravel, the subbase of this product would be considered an acceptable landscape material. That to me is a bit strange and perhaps backwards, that we are okay with what would be a not attractive material, but the aesthetically pleasing piece that we're going to put on top, that somehow creates a problem. And I don't disagree with Ms. Cronister that the code as written assumes a natural surface. However, the code is outdated. This is a new product. This is a new product that, as I showed last time, there is legislation going on across the country. There's legislation going on in municipalities throughout the country to specifically allow, and in some instances, prohibit cities from denying applications to use this product. And so I have no doubt that that was what was assumed when the code was written, but the code is old, it's outdated, and these types of products are coming on all over the place because of all of the positive benefits it provides. Now, irrespective of the rain season that we've had this year, we are an area prone to drought. We have consistently been in drought conditions for the last, I think, 10 or 15 years. So this is the type of product in these types of conditions that serve as a benefit. We provided you several examples all over the place in this city. Some of the concerns raised in the staff report I think are just unfounded because perhaps there is not a familiarity with the product. As I mentioned last time, I have this in my backyard. All of the concerns that they've raised, I simply have not experienced those in the 2+ years that we've had this product. I know that there was at least one commission member that had used a similar product in the past, and I think what he had said was likewise, they haven't seen any problems. And so the installations of these have been in areas citywide that are in heavy trafficked areas. You think of Chisholm Creek. I was actually there last Saturday, and it's in the kind of the main play area outside one of the restaurants by the pond, and it's in an area where there are a kid slide and a kid like tightrope walk. So it's in an area that's going to receive heavy traffic. And the reason it's there is because it stands up better, frankly, to heavy traffic than typical grass would. You couldn't have fescue with that kind of traffic, and Bermuda would likewise take a beating. So it provides the best of all worlds in that it's an aesthetically pleasing. It doesn't use water. It doesn't require you to put pesticides or fertilizers on it that are going to end up in the water stream. So it's an eco-friendly product that I think this city would be beneficial in allowing people to utilize. But with that, I'd like Mr. Parker to get up here and kind of give just a bit of background on the product, his experience with the product, but more importantly, allow the three that voted against it to ask him any questions to perhaps get a level of comfort with this type of product. So unless there's questions of me, I will turn it over to Brendan.
Are there any questions at this time? Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, Brendan Parker, 5520 North Barnes address, correct? Is that what you were needing? Yes, I'm the owner of Always Greener, so ask away if you'd like on things you need to know.
Are there any questions for the applicant? I do have some. In regards to, what we're talking about here is essentially how do we set the bar? How do we ensure that what is being considered, that down the road somebody doesn't come back and say precedence has been set and now I'm going to bring a product in and my product is an equivalent because it's green and it's not grass, so it needs to be approved because precedence set. How do we at this point have a discussion about the level of care or the performance of the material or the systems that are being installed, how it's going to be maintained long term, all of the elements that would give some degree of comfort to this commission in considering this product?
I'm not sure. Are there committees or is there the same type of argument for housing and for streets and all that same kind of public material?
So I think what the chair is asking is, so how do we ensure that it's not a cheap plastic, right? Like what is the material that you use to ensure that it isn't something that is going to fade and become damaged and not be attractive?
Or even the subbase.
Sure.
Or even what is the specified fading over time? What is the longevity of the strand? Mm-hmm. What are the performance specifications that could be established that could set a basis of design for consideration in the future that somebody couldn't come back later and say, I have a rubber base with an indoor-outdoor carpet that's green, and that's exactly what was specified, that's what was approved in a prior application.
Why don't you talk about the installation process in terms of what you go down, and the different layers of sub-base?
Okay. Yes. So for an installation, we would remove any soil and/or gravel or what might be there, even concrete if it's depending on the installation. We would replace that with anywhere from 3 to 5, 4 to 6 inches of 1 inch. We use a 1-inch rock, like a clean gravel, that goes on the sub, and then we top it with some screenings or fines, what we call it. It's just a gravel that's got some dust in it that compacts, and then that is compacted and graded the proper way. Turf then is on top of that, which is then either stapled, depending on if it's if a nailer board is used as the perimeter or if it's nailed in with 6-inch nails. And then on top of that, into the turf goes a silica sand, and then brushed and broomed, and that's pretty much the process in a very small nutshell.
I just wanted to clarify, and sorry if I missed it. You installed this installation.
Correct.
And what you're describing is how you installed this installation.
That's how we do most everyone, yes. Unless it's something that's, maybe it's on concrete, and then we might use a paneling that allows for air and water to flow underneath, and then turf on top of that. So yes, but this one specifically was with the gravel. Yes, the turf, most of the turfs have holes punched in a certain pattern that allows water to go through the actual drains, or it runs off the top, sheet drains into, off the top of it into wherever that maybe drains or wherever else the water needs to go. Trying to think of it's a pretty simple product in terms of how it's installed and what it does. And as far as fading, all the turfs we use are UV protected, so they won't fade. And it's got a 15 to 20 to 25-year lifespan, depending on how there is, as long as it's got some maintenance involved, which is minimal compared to a fescue or Bermuda or anything like that. Obviously, the lack of water, which is a good thing, and lack of any kind of crew to take care of it.
Anthony, from the discussion last week, or last month, there were really two considerations. One had to do with the environment, what this was releasing, and then another one had to do with quality. Just having done a little bit of research, there may be some paths to better define. It seems like the California Proposition 65 and some of the, like in this lead certificate, it references compliant with EPA, Center for Disease Control, Consumer Product Safety Commission, and California Proposition 65 requirements might be a way to address the environmental side. And then there's also another sheet that was submitted in the original packet. We also have a copy of it today that talks about certain characteristics that this particular product has. So there may be something in there that could be used to better define the level of quality in the future.
And one additional idea that I had is if the concern is longevity, we'd be happy to stipulate that this would be some form of temporary CA, where he said 15 to 25 years, so at 10 years, make us come back. And if it hasn't held up, we'll rip it out. My guess is in 10 years, there's going to be way more people that want to do this than not. But we'd be happy to do that if there's a mechanism to do so.
In reality, this should be evaluated on a level playing field against the natural turf surface.
Sure.
So a natural turf surface has just as easy an opportunity to go away if not maintained properly. And I guess that if it was to go away entirely, it still wouldn't be a cause for any kind of problem unless it got too tall. So
right.
I'm more curious about what we were speaking of when we said, what is it that would protect be a protection against something of an inferior product being introduced at a later time. I did have one follow-up question, though. You said that sometimes that there is sheet flow for rainwater off the top. You've got holes punched through the turf, but it goes down, and it can either go into a drainage system. Is the base considered permeable or impervious whenever it's complete? Will it drain water through it?
Yes.
Okay, when you said that it would sheet flow off the top, I was just curious if it was creating something that would actually be impervious.
So in my yard, it is the place that's dry quickest. The sogginess that exists everywhere else in the yard isn't persistent in this. So to answer or respond to what you were saying, the way to do it, to ensure that somebody doesn't come up here and say, well, I've got green carpet, this counts, is the motion bakes those into it, or it's approved with unique circumstances that all of these factors have been met. So when the next person comes in, if they can't show that they have a product that meets this high level, well, then it's an easy no.
I just want to say that, yes, I agree if the commission identifies certain criteria that they want to acknowledge as the basis of why they're approving it, that's easy to do. The staff has virtually no way on any product to ever confirm that that was what was actually installed. For inspections, we only have dimensions to go on unless we happened to observe the installation. But I still think it's valid to embed the specifics in the motion.
Could we not require that when it is submitted that they provide technical data?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, yes, we can capture all that in the approval paperwork. We just probably can't ever,
Right.
for sure, know.
Do we have any other questions for the applicant?
So I'll put forward a motion to approve.
Before you do,
Okay.
could I ask if anyone from the audience would like to speak to this matter? Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commission. I'm Bill Bleakley, 607 Northwest 7th. I'm appearing as president of the Sosa Neighborhood Association. We have been objecting to this application. I think this is the third hearing now, and Mr. Box is directing your attention to whether this is a good product or not, and whether it serves ecological and environmental and aesthetic purposes. But that's a secondary consideration of this commission. The primary consideration is, does the current code allow it? And if it doesn't, do you have the authority to grant an exemption or a variance to that code? And I would argue that the code does not provide for this product, and that if they would like to install it, they need to advocate for a code change. And we're in a situation of someone asking for forgiveness instead of permission, which further complicates the issue. But not only if you do decide to permit this, you're setting a precedent not only for the Cottage District, but all the other districts that you serve. I'd like to point out that we're not talking about people's backyards with their children and dogs or side yards. We're talking about public property in the right-of-way off of the street, which the city has directed how it should be maintained and landscaped. The nice thing about turf grass or gravel or something that is currently being used is that it has quick remediation. If somebody is letting weeds grow and they're cited for that, there are weed killers, there are preventative germination products, there is mowing that can immediately remediate the problem. I don't know how much this turf grass has cost the applicant, but getting somebody to deal with this kind of an issue is going to be a much more difficult situation than directing someone to get their right-of-way mowed or covered with some surface, be it turf grass or otherwise. So we really encourage you to deny this application. There's the other issue that is important to us. It may be a tertiary issue, and that's the aesthetics of what is happening in Sosa. Developers have put in developments across the street and 2 blocks down from this that are beautifully landscaped. There are developments either individually owned or by speculators throughout the district that have been properly developed under the current code. And we would just ask that this be required of this applicant as it was of us, and be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
I have a question for the applicant. The staff report, and we talked about this last month also, the staff report talks about the original certificate of approval and what was anticipated in that certificate of approval. Can you address the disparity between that, what was originally approved by this commission and what was actually installed?
So I think there's still installation. Can you cycle through some of your pictures? We talked about, I think, some verticality. That's a good one. Some verticality and what was expected. If you look on the picture on the top left, there are flower boxes that exist that will have plants that will allow for that verticality. So I don't know that this is altogether different than what was anticipated at the time. Instead of it being Bermuda grass, it's something that will stay, green year-round. But the other plantings and other flowers and the verticality elements that I think it was you that asked about last time will still be achieved through those flower boxes that exist on what are those front porches.
Yeah, and the staff report talks about, and I went back and looked at the original, there was anticipated, and the original renderings and things showed much more than just flat grass in the area that we're talking about here, not in the boxes. At the street level here, there was, quite frankly, just a lot more visual interest in the landscaping that was proposed.
That's a good point. In the original approval, they had clumps of maiden grass and some other plantings around the edges of the stem wall, which we haven't even talked about
By
that.
comparison, my point is that this, and I've gone by the development here, and by comparison to what was actually approved, this is not, it's not in line with what was originally approved, and it's quite a bit more anemic looking than what was originally approved or considered by this commission.
So my understanding, though, is, and Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, what is really approved by the UDC is what we spend all the time talking about are buildings and materials. I don't remember any debate whatsoever on landscaping, and I'm not sure if the landscaping is something, frankly, that if we went in with real grass but didn't put the maiden grass, that there'd be an issue with the CA.
No, there wouldn't, because
Okay.
the ornamental grasses and shrubs are not part of, for this project, are not part of the required landscaping. I think Matt's point is it did give a sense of how it would be originally, and that's not how it's going to be, which is potentially fine, but it's somewhat clouding the issue.
We're getting into two items, though. We're getting into the item of the overall aesthetics of the project versus the differences between two products: natural grass, artificial turf grass. That's really what we're talking about today, and the rest of the items are valid, and maybe they need to be a separate item that's discussed or not with respect to, and I think it is not, because it's not part of this review. So we're really talking about whether or not we feel like it's an equivalent to have the artificial turf grass in this location rather than a natural grass.
Yes, what I took from Matt's point was, does that mean you can never have, lots of lawns have other landscaping items in that, and if we're saying this will always be turf, does that mean it's always turf and we don't get to do plantings that we thought softened the stem wall?
In the event that you had some kind of grass or plantings that started to show inside of this, what's the method for removing it?
What's the what?
if you have some weeds or something coming up inside, what is the method for removing it? Is the method solely hand picking, or is there, at an owner's discretion, use traditional methods to remove weeds or grasses?
It's that I can show you how I do it.
Yeah,
I do this
Yeah.
in my backyard.
I understand.
But yes, it'd be the discretion of it'd be like any other weed in any yard, right?
Correct. That's my question is that the discussion of if a weed shows up in this one, it's no different than if
Correct.
a weed shows up in the other one. It's just you won't mow it.
Correct.
If you don't mow this yard, you'll do something else.
I have a blower.
But maintenance is still an issue in both conditions.
Sure.
I'll also reiterate, I think we talked about this last time, and it came up earlier. This strip, if they had come in proposing it to be pavers or decomposed granite, staff wouldn't have raised an issue. Those are frequently used in the right-of-way. They're low. One of those is lower maintenance than the other. It's just that this product has not been approved in design review before and is not specifically discussed in the guidelines.
And that gets back to my point. The irony that I see is that what I believe to not be the attractive stuff underneath, we wouldn't be having this discussion because it would be a landscape treatment, presumably, but the aesthetically pleasing piece on top forces us to have this discussion.
Is a concrete paver approved? A concrete paver? Not a decomposed granite and not a clay-fired paver, but is a concrete paver approved?
It could be approved.
Okay.
And, I mean, the whole strip could have been poured in place concrete.
Do we have any more questions for the applicant?
Going back to what we were talking about with weeds and removal of weeds, I don't know if we have a submission here from someone in the neighborhood of pictures of weeds that are currently existing or have recently existed since last month when we talked. I mean, I know you're demonstrating or trying to demonstrate that it's very easy to maintain this and pick weeds, but what's not adding up to me is that during the month that you're under review for this, that there are already weeds in
I think there were 3 weeds. I think there were 3 weeds, or maybe it's 4. I wish that the neighbor across the street from me only had 3 or 4 weeds, right?
Yeah, but we're not talking about the neighbor across the street from you. We're talking about this, that in the month between the last hearing and this hearing, there are already weeds. What's going to happen 6 months from now after this is approved, if it's approved? I mean, if there's already issues during the time that you know you're under scrutiny.
Well, I don't think the presence of a weed is an issue, right? I think that's just a natural fact. I mean,
well, no, it's not a natural fact in an unnatural surface. If this is, I mean, I don't know if you have these pictures, but the weeds really do stand out as very different than the surface that's there. Weeds are a natural fact, but weeds in the middle of a concrete sidewalk stand out quite a bit. Weeds in the middle of green astroturf stand out quite a bit. I mean, they are not weeds that are part of a natural lawn.
I'm not sure I follow because, I mean, there's no, I think what you're getting at is some sort of code compliance issue. And weeds happen, and if they're not at a certain level, then there's no code compliance issue.
No, I'm not getting at a code compliance issue. I'm getting at an aesthetics issue. And you're saying that the subjective standard that you're saying that this is a more pleasant aesthetic is, maybe not agreed to by everyone, but when you have this and there are weeds in that, it does stand out as not aesthetically pleasing.
Sure. So we could have gravel. The individual that submitted that has a gravel front yard. And so we could have a gravel strip that would be permitted, and we could have weeds that were 11 inches tall, ugly as can be, and there'd be no problem from a code perspective. And so I'm just not sure I understand the
Do
point
you think that would have been approved by this commission?
You wouldn't. I don't think you'd have to approve it. I think that would be a landscape treatment.
So if the landscape treatment that was proposed was gravel with weeds in it, we should say okay, because technically that's...
I don't think they'd have...
If it had been approved as gravel, concrete, pavers, or decomposed granite, and it had weeds 11 inches high, it's allowed. There's nothing...
It wouldn't come before you.
And the committee would not have foreseen it, obviously.
I think the issue is that we have to proceed, to review this case as if it has not yet been installed. So if it had not yet been installed, we're discussing the merits of it's the same as if we're discussing whether it is a decomposed granite surface, whether it is a concrete paver surface, or whether it's an whether it's an artificial turf surface. We're basing it on the merits, maybe not. We just happen to be seeing some of the after effects in some of the photographs that have been presented. So we're trying to evaluate whether or not the artificial turf surface is acceptable, and if it is acceptable, what are we going to mandate as the basis of design for anything with reference to precedent?
And I guess my point is the fact that we're already seeing some of the after effects it's not something we should ignore.
Right, it could, I think even though it's already installed, it could serve as another reference of an installation so you can see what the long-term or short-term effects are.
So, Matt, I appreciate what you're saying. My concern is I've seen a lot of natural lawns that have weeds popping up through that are 11 inches, and you can't do anything until you get that 1 inch. I'm trying to evaluate kind of on an equal footing here, and the maintenance concerns that I'm hearing about would be there whether it was a lawn, whether it was rock, or even just concrete with a crack. So, to me, the fact that there are weeds, there are weeds in drives. It happens. Is this apt to get more weeds than gravel or grass? I would say I don't know that it would. So I hear what you're saying, but to me the maintenance issue is kind of a moot point. If you don't maintain anything, whether it be gravel, fake grass, or natural lawn, you will have an issue. And that's how I'm evaluating.
And I agree with that. I mean, my point, I guess it's two issues that I'm trying to make here, 2 points I'm trying to make. A, it's, compliance with what was originally intended and trying to be a good neighbor with the rest of the community. The other part of it, though, is what's the indication of what the maintenance is going to look like? And if, like I said, during the period when this is under strict scrutiny, if there's already maintenance issues appearing, there's already the indication that there's maintenance issues, that does not give me a lot of confidence in what this is going to look like a year down the road or 3 years down the road. This is a relatively new installation. This should be the period when it looks the best, especially considering that everybody knows that it's, the neighbors are looking at it, the neighbors are scrutinizing it right now, it's coming in front of this commission again. If it's already not being maintained to a good standard, then that gives me a lot of pause.
Is it possible to grant a temporary, there was a reference to 10 years, but let's say we put in place a 5-year, and in 5 years they have to come back. In a way, they're incentivized to make sure that it's being maintained. And if it doesn't meet UV, if it starts to fray, we as a commission then have an opportunity to say, put something else back.
I think that's a reasonable condition that you could put in the CA.
What's the trigger mechanism for that? How does that in practicality work for staff?
Yeah, we have a big database. It's the same database that Permit Desk uses, that Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, a big database, and we flag an expiration date. And on the expiration date, a big report runs that somebody in our office sees, and the applicant gets a letter that it's about to expire.
Can I also make a, it seems like also if we were to approve that and it sets precedents, I kind of feel like there should be some standards that us as a commissioners set, like, just like, you know, certain guidelines that are met based on, you know, safety, lead-free, you know, environmental-free. Is that something that could be set as a standard for approval? Yes.
There are no other comments from commissioners or from individuals. Entertain a motion.
Is the correct term temporary approval? What is the correct language?
I think you would approve it, and then one of the conditions would be that it would be for so many years.
Yeah, or that it be brought back to the committee, you could say, with the condition that the application be brought back to the committee in August 2024.
What year? 2000? So I'm going to take a pass at this. It's fairly lengthy. I'm going to put forward a motion to approve on the basis that the synthetic grass have a 1.5-inch ply, is lead-free, and meets the requirements of the EPA Centers for Disease Control, Consumer Product Safety Commission, and the California Proposition 65. And that they return back 5 years from now in 2024.
Motion.
I'll second.
That's a Charnico Miller motion. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you.
We will now call item 6B, UDCA 1922, 1112 Northwest 23rd Street.
This address is the Gold Dome, which probably caught your attention as soon as you got your packet. In 2016, the commission approved a request to remove the bank drive-through structures that are on the south side of the building, and it was approved. In the National Register paperwork, it already identifies those as not part of the historic fabric of the building because they were a later addition. So the committee approved it. That approval has expired without being renewed and without the work having been done. So the application is being brought back here. It's the exact same application, and we recommended approval just like we did last time. And the applicant is here.
If the applicant would like to step up and speak to the item, and please sign in and give us your name and address.
Commission. I am Jonathan Russell, reside at 326 Northwest 19th, and I'm the managing member of the property at 1112 Northwest 23rd Street, otherwise known as the Gold Dome. Our application is to demolish the drive-throughs that exist on the property. The previous application, which was approved by this board, was brought by a previous owner. So now we are wanting to do the same thing. As stated, the drive-throughs are not original to the building. They are not historic by definition. And they're quite a nuisance for us, from people breaking into the building and stealing copper and tearing it apart. It's an easy access point into the building. So we want to take the building back to its original design, and this would be one step in doing so. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the commission?
Is there a underground tunnel that goes from the building to these drive-throughs?
From one, there's a remote drive-through, and one connected, well, they're both connected to the building, but the second one is via a tunnel to the first drive-through.
Okay. Will that be demolished also? Or?
It will.
Okay,
yes.
so everything
It'll be
underground?
filled and compacted and all that stuff.
Okay.
What happens to the portion of the building that connects to the dome?
We will fill it back in with an original type material. It's block on that side of the building, so we'll immediately fill that right back in.
And a question for staff. I don't believe I saw any rendering of that, but if we were to approve, would we need to condition it on that, where it connects, being brought back to original, or is that something that staff would watch for?
We could watch for that. I think it's assumed it has to be filled in with something. I also anticipate another application in the next few years of other remedial work, and I had assumed that would be part of it.
Could we add that to the motion?
Yes.
Other questions from the commission? Anyone here in the audience that would like to speak to this? Thank you. Any discussion, commissioners?
I'll make a motion that we approve the application on the basis that the project meets the regulations and guidelines of the Urban Design Overlay District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D in the staff report, with the stipulation that the infill material that is going to go back in place of the current connection to the building be reviewed by staff.
So we have a motion by Blatt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Gilroy. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That is approved. Next item up is under other business, item 7A, SPUD 1135. This is 1917 Northwest 23rd Street.
Commissioner Tin Nguyen, recusing myself from this.
Thank you.
This item is for the commission to make a recommendation to Planning Commission about rezoning this property into a simplified planned unit development. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this stretch of Northwest 23rd, and a lot of the homes have been converted into businesses, professional, small professional offices and home businesses. The applicant for this one wants to make it a barber shop, but that use is not allowed in the base zoning. So, because the base zoning is R1, So they need to rezone it to allow the barber shop. Staff is in favor of this because it's not going to change the structure. So many of the other homes in this block, in the next couple of blocks, have been converted to low-impact businesses, and the applicant is proposing to keep the existing front driveway and park customers in the back. So we think it's fine. It's just a process they need to go through.
And I understand the applicant is here, but may not want to speak unless anyone has questions.
I actually have a question for staff. I'm thinking back to, I believe it was a new construction in the Plaza District where, it might be where Empire Pizza is now, but there was a case that we had a lot of issues with the ingress egress for parking in the rear, and it needs to be wide enough for two. Obviously, this doesn't, is that an issue here, or does that not apply somehow?
That is a good question. I know we talked about it when we were looking at this. And it was for the Empire Pizza, the Empire Pizza, and using the alley and using the front. I think the actual SPUD can specify the number of parking spaces that are or are not required, and it can also specify the driveway width, which it currently doesn't. But where? +1 standard stall, where are you? Oh, access, yeah, access. Access will be from one driveway with a minimum width of 9 feet.
So the fact that this is the spud negates that?
Yes.
Okay.
It does whatever variances need for that. So yes, the intent was that they would be able to keep that existing driveway and not have to redo it.
Thank you.
So the fact that this goes to a SPUD, does the SPUD say that with the exception of changing the allowable use, that the balance of the UDC guidelines will remain intact?
Yes, all uses allowed in the NB Neighborhood Business District will be allowed.
Curious about the rest of the everything that would be under our review.
It's still under urban design.
Oh, it's still under, thank you.
Yes, this is not removing it from urban design. So any improvements they make in the future, they or the next property owner, they would have to come back to committee. Site will be developed in accordance with the UD Urban Design District zoning ordinance, except for the following. At least that was the intent. If that's not how you read it, we want to change it because that was the agreement.
They reference 5 parking spots. Does that design come back to staff?
If they have to create that in the back, yes, it would have to come back to staff for the permit.
Okay.
Any other discussion or questions for staff? And this, if anybody is interested, here we would be making a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission. That would be the form of the motion, unless there's any other discussion.
The only other discussion I would add is that, we have several of these strips like this around the city that are that were originally residential, that are clearly on commercial corridors now and are being slowly, kind of piecemeal this way, one by one, developed into commercial. To the extent that we can, as a city, anticipate that and look at parking considerations for that, possibly even, linking backyards and having one driveway be in and one driveway be out, or whatever the case may be. There's one on the 400 block of 30th that, because of the restrictions, it's causing parking problems for some property that I have. I'm in favor of this particular thing, but I think it's something that the city should look at because this is not an isolated.
Absolutely. I expect this will be addressed in the big code update, where it will be easier to automatically allow various uses without people having to come in and spot rezone every single time. In fact, that's the number one goal of the code update.
I'll move to provide a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission on the basis that the project meets the regulations and guidelines of the Urban Design Overlay District zoning ordinance as referenced in Section C of the staff report.
We have a motion by Commissioner Blatt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Charnico. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the recommendation is approved. We have some communications, quite a number of them. Would any commissioner like to request discussion of any of these communication items? Any member of the public? Is there anyone here that would like discussion of any of these communication items? Any comments from Planning Department staff?
I think we have a September meeting. I'll look at Paula. She snuck in. I think we have a September meeting.
Okay. Any comments from commissioners? Well, our next meeting date, if we have one, will be the 25th of September. And with that, we'll be adjourned.
See y'all later.